In this lesson, Rita and I are going to show you how to execute a parry in circle 6 when defending against an opponent who is pressing you on the piece. Now typically, when we are parrying in a bout, especially for beginners and novices, we rely heavily on the traditional parry 4, parry 6, which is quite linear and parallel, goes from one side to the other. And this is fairly effective, especially when we're fencing with someone who is a comparable skill level. But when you're dealing with someone who's pretty proficient at their attack and also rather reliable in their line changes, you need something a little bit more manageable to help stop that attack coming in. So this is where the circle parry comes in. We are going to be focusing heavily on the circle in parry 6, but what it really is similar to a search that we did in the previous lesson, and that is where you're going to be rotating your blade in a circular fashion that leads in the line you want to finish it, but more specifically, it's going to lead in the line that you want to drive your opponent's attack away from. So if you're attacking me in position 6 right here, I'm going to be using a circular parry which is going to lead in that direction. So when the attack comes, I can push it off outside and away from my target, and that allows me to make my riposte at the same time. It's very reliable because I'm able to control it, and it's covering multiple lines at the same time. So if you do change your line, instead you're attacking into 4, I'm still covering that line. It is a little bit more dangerous because if you're attacking me here and I'm parrying in 6, I can draw you across my torso. But at the same time, if I'm prepared, I can adjust. I can open the distance a little bit. So what Rita and I are going to do is show you exactly how this parry first works, and then we'll include a little bit of movement. So we're going to get started. We're going to get started with just the parry for now. We're not going to include the riposte. The reason for that is I want you to see exactly how the parry is going to function. First thing to note, her hand is leading the defensive action. That means it's pulling her arm forward. This allows for her to search and parry my blade earlier as opposed to later. If her arm is back further, she has to wait for my attack to travel closer to her before she can act on it. This increases the risk of getting hit. So we want to keep it a little bit further, and in the future this is also going to help you with your riposte, as your point doesn't have to travel as far forward. So I'm going to start slow. As I said, there's no riposte. I start the extension, she initiates the parry. And as you can see, it's a sweeping circle. It's quite tight. It's not very large. And she's catching me with the forte of her blade against my foil. If I continue to travel forward, I will glide onto her blade. And what's more important is she's always going to maintain control of the forte. So it's a very powerful parry. So now that we know how the parry works, we're going to include the riposte. You're going to note that she's not going to retreat, she's going to stay in the same space. Just watch how quick the riposte can be, even in a slow setting, as her blade doesn't have to travel that far forward. So I start my extension, there's the parry, there's the riposte. As you can see, she doesn't have to do much with her extension because her arm is already leading forward, following her hand. So, we'll do that one more time. I'm on guard, I initiate the attack, and there's the parry riposte. Very quick. Now there's one thing you want to make sure you're not doing with your circle parry, and that is pulling your arm back. So if she's extending and she pulls her arm back with her circle parry, I start the attack and she pulls her arm back, I might be able to disengage, or worse, by the time she does find me, I will have hit the target. So it's very important that you don't jeopardize your hand position. You don't need to pull back and make the parry. You want to make a direct riposte, so again, looking at how it works, she's advancing her hand, I initiate the attack, and there we go. So we've got a pretty good idea as to how to employ the circle parry 6 and the riposte that follows it. But now let's consider what happens when our opponent is attacking with a considerable amount of strength and timing behind them. If you're staying still as Rita was, you're stationary, you only have a finite amount of time to find me. There is a way, though, that you can increase the time you need to find the attack, especially if your opponent is busy changing the lines. And that's by stepping back with your parry. Now, in previous lessons, I've discussed that stepping back after the parry is not a good idea because you're going to be surrendering right away. You've taken right away, then you step back, so you're giving it up. In this case, it's very important that you make the parry with your retreat so that the riposte can immediately follow. And that's what we're going to look at in this demonstration. Pay close attention to Rita's retreat as it is timed with her parry. You'll notice that she ends her retreat as soon as she's found my blade, and then she's simply going to extend her riposte. So I'm going to push the attack, and there we go. That's the riposte right there, and the retreat is giving her a little bit more time to find my blade. And as you can see, she's still parried with the fork. So that means she's going to have control no matter what I do. So keep in mind, when you are executing a circle parry 6, you do want to make sure that you have a good stable on guard. You want your hand advanced forward so it's not going to pull back and limit the amount of time you have to parry. You want it forward, and remember those searches. When you are searching, they're going to be very tight. The rotation doesn't have to be deep. I don't have to make it a giant sweeping action. This is not helpful for a direct riposte. So again, sit down, lead with your hand, make a nice tight circle 6 where you expect the attack to come from, and make your riposte.